Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, I'm very pleasantly surprised to be bringing you a review for the new Walmart exclusive vintage reissue of Beast Wars Tigatron. If you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Tigatron's packaging, which includes his tech specs and instructions. Then we'll open it up. We'll take a look at Tigatron himself in both Beast and Robot modes. Naturally, I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Tigatron comes in a recreation of his original packaging. There are, however, some key differences here. For one, he has that, rocky bubble that everybody's so fond of. However, by the time the original Tigatron toy was actually released, they had already gotten rid of the rocky bubble and just had like the regular oval-shaped one. So this does make it a bit less accurate, though admittedly way cooler looking than the original packaging. There are also some minor differences on the card itself. It used to say Heroic Maximal above the name Tigatron. They cut that off for some reason. Here, it says it's recommended for ages 8 up. Originally, there used to be a blurb here that actually said 5 up. So apparently they think kids have gotten dumber in the last, quarter of a century, because they raised the minimum age for this same action figure by 3 years. Go figure. Another big change is that here on the bottom where they show off the transformation for the toy, the photography has been updated to reflect the changes made to this reissue. Because this figure, while the same mold, more or less, as the original Tigatron, it actually has a different color scheme, like all the other vintage Beast Wars reissues have so far. Now this one's a bit interesting though, because it appears to be more or less identical to the Takara release of the Beast Wars Tigatron toy, which is a bit more screen accurate looking. So he kind of inadvertently ends up actually being a direct reissue, just not of the Hasbro version of the figure. The biggest difference is him having a much whiter white color than the regular Hasbro one, which was more of a cream color. Some changes made to the color of his leg armor, and the color of his face and eyes have also been altered. Now, unfortunately, that Takara Tigatron is infamous for having really bad yellowing as it gets older, to the point where it's just as yellowed, if not more yellowed, than just the natural color of the Hasbro version. Time will tell if this suffers the same fate. I'd like to think that, it's made from better pigments and materials now, but I don't know. I guess we'll check back in a few years to see if it's still this nice bright white color that it is now. So let's go ahead and turn this thing around to see the back. And here you get to see the tech spec as well as the instructions. And if you've seen the other reviews of these, you already know that this packaging is now multilingual, which means it's got like 5 different languages on there for everything, which also means that a lot of things are, abbreviated to be able to fit all that text. So here on the tech spec card, he has fewer actual stat ratings than the old ones. For some reason, they took some of them off, but he's got a strength of 8, intelligence of 3, which I guess when they originally envisioned Tigatron, they thought it was kind of dumb. He's got a speed of 8 and then a firepower of 7. This also shows off his secret weapon locations. It says tail becomes cannon, stomach becomes squirter. So they use the same awkward terminology on Tigatron's tech spec card that they used on Cheetor's, because they called his gut gun a squirter as well. Which, boy, that just doesn't sound good. Alright, so you get his faction symbol here, Maximal Tigatron, function reconnaissance, and his flavor text, or his bio, reads, Tigatron roams the frozen tundra in animal form, but quickly converts to robot mode for battle, removing its tail and converting it to a powerful quasar cannon to vaporize Predacons. That actually sounds almost exactly like Cheetor's blurb. It's really close. Were they originally that close? It was like a real copy and paste job there. Alright, then we get our cutout instructions. The first frame shows you where to store his little secret weapons, both on his backside and on his stomach there. And then they do the transformation for the robot mode. And then here, this shows you how to transform his tail weapon, and also how to fill his gut gun with water, because it is like an actual little squirting water gun, and then place it in his hand. So he's not a very complicated toy, so really this little instruction card is about all you need. Now, before we open this and, see the toy itself, there's something I feel that I have to do here. You may have noticed that the card art on this packaging does not match the toy that's inside. The Tigatron in the artwork is primarily orange, like, more standard tiger. And that's because the prototype for the Tigatron toy was an actual orange tiger, which is what the artwork was based off of. And for the longest time, we didn't have an actual, physical plastic product that represented that. However, boom, here it is. That Mutant Tigatron that just came out in the Kingdom line is really serving its purpose now. This is that. So I think that's really cool. Thought it was a really clever way for them to just kind of work that old school design in there and make a nice nod to one of the more infamous pieces of artwork, because this caused a lot of speculation back in the day, right? People weren't aware that there was an orange Tigatron prototype floating around. At least, people that didn't have kind of insider access. So a lot of people wondered what was with the orange Tigatron. And not only did we eventually find out, what the deal was with that, how it was based on the prototype of the old toy, but now we actually get a plastic representation of that. So I love how things come full circle like that. Okay, sorry, I had to do it. I mean, I got a toy of it. Why not show it off, right? All right, now it's actually time to open this up. Okay, now we're going to see Tigatron's beast mode in full. And just like the Cheetor toy, of which this is a recolor, he's a brick, but he's a very pretty brick. Look at that. Just nice bright whites and this just really well contrasted black stripes here. He's got these really cool, mint green eyes. He's got a lot of painted detail on the face, the mouth, the whiskers, the nose. His gut gun, the barrel still, kind of sticks out awkwardly. But because it's unpainted, it at least blends in better. Doesn't look like he actually has a gun barrel sticking off of him. You can see a lot of his bluish green here on the back of the legs, which, is not hidden in the beast mode at all. And yeah, I mean, if you've seen any version of this mold before, you kind of know what to expect there. He doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, the hind legs can move, but then he can't really stand unless you put him in just kind of this neutral position here. So yeah, I mean, he's really a static display piece, but he looks really good doing it. And unlike Cheetor, his build lends itself a lot better to, the kind of cat he's supposed to be, in this case a tiger. Tigers are much bulkier and more muscular looking than cheetahs, so it just kind of makes sense. Speaking of Cheetor, here is the vintage reissue of that character that I just finally got around to finishing the review on, because I'm useless. I'm useless, guys. I'm sorry. Should have had his review done a long time ago, but I wanted to, get that out there before I did Tigatron. So like I said, total mold mates, no molding differences between them at all. This is what I'm talking about the barrel of the gut gun just kind of poking out there. Far more noticeable on Cheetor because his is actually, painted. After that, you can see that the actual paint mask on these two is completely different. One having, obviously, spots, the other having stripes, but even the faces look quite different from each other with different details on them. Yeah, they're not just total carbon copies of each other, which is a good thing. You want them to feel like two different, species of cat instead of just a yellow cat and a white cat. And then next, we get our comparison with the newest version of Tigatron, being the Transformers Kingdom Tigatron, which is a far more realistically proportioned tiger and, much more screen-accurate robot. Now, you'll notice this bit of, yellowing all over his body. For this toy, that's intentional. It's meant to make him look more realistic because in real life, white tigers aren't fully white. They're just kind of very, very pale orange tigers. So they decided to add that little detail in there, which I've said it several times now, I think it looks terrible. Almost ruins a toy. Luckily, it's not nearly as noticeable in his beast mode, or his robot mode. I get it. There's no such thing as a white tiger, but there's also no such thing as a purple T-Rex, so let us have nice things. Look how much prettier this is than that. This right here is just a foreshadowing of what's probably going to happen to this guy in the next decade or so. I don't need a reminder of how prone to yellowing white Beast Wars characters were. We get it. One thing that's worth kind of pointing out and talking about, because it's something I harp on a lot, the weapon storage. specifically for the gut gun. So for the old Tigatron, the gut gun mostly just became part of his body, right? Became like the underbelly area, the chest. You just have this little barrel poking out, which you can just kind of ignore. For this guy, because Hasbro apparently doesn't like doing weapon storage anymore, it just hangs off the bottom of him. It looks terrible. It looks like some hideous growth. So yeah, something that this old toy does better than his modern update is the actual weapon storage. Now they do at least do a good job of hiding the tail away, because his tail does also double as a weapon, but not nearly as cool of a weapon. It's purely a whip, like it's just the tail with a handle. This actually folds up and becomes a gun and everything. So yeah, there's just a certain design philosophy of, very cleverly hiding weapons away that doesn't exist anymore. They just tuck them up somewhere or plug them onto the side. There's not that cool, secret reveal the weapon kind of thing that they used to have. And I think it's very much becoming a lost art. Right now we get to look at the robot mode. And as far as I can tell, this guy really is just a reissue of the Takara version of Tigatron. When you look at his colors, between the shades of white and bluish green used here, and then the placement of the colors, he has, the silver feet and blue-green shins, as opposed to the original toy, which had blue feet and silver shins. The original also had a silver face with black eyes, whereas this guy has a much more show-accurate blue face with red eyes. So it's interesting. It makes you wonder, did they have, the paint layout or something of the old Takara one laying around? I'm not really sure how they go back and, redo figures after, long years. I get how the molds work themselves. You either have the mold sitting around or you don't. But when determining, the plastic colors and the paint colors, there's got to be a spreadsheet or something, right, they go back to. So I'm guessing they just had the Takara one on hand and decided, hey, this is, pretty show accurate. Let's go with this. Now, do I think it looks better than the original? I do. I think it's much better looking than the original Tigatron toy. It's just very beautifully done. Show accuracy or not, I think it's just way nicer. Still disappointed that it's not the original because, like I've said with the other reissues, a reissue should be just that. It should be, more or less the same toy that was released way back when, being reissued. This is not really a reissue, it's just a redeco of that toy. Now in this case, this redeco just happens to be very similar to a different existing version of Tigatron, but that's not really what they're marketing this as, you know what I mean? It is in the Hasbro, North American-based packaging. So I am disappointed to an extent, but I will also, admit that this is just the way better version of that old Tigatron mold. And another thing he just happens to share with the Takara version is the fact that his tiger head can't point down when it's in his chest, it points forward. Because that Takara Tigatron was the first use of this mold, where they made that running change to the whole architecture behind the head here to make it face forward for whatever reason. I still don't know why they did that. I'm not sure what the benefit is. So it is another way that it makes it more accurate to the Japanese version, but less accurate to the original, Hasbro-based Tigatron toy. So just, some things I'm noticing. All right, so I kept the weapons off to give you a good look at his really nice silver forearms and hands. Let's go ahead and attach those now, so you can see what it looks like wielding everything. Here's another change too, is that the Takara version actually dropped the paint details on the gut gun. Used to have a silver there on the barrel, but they took that off. So there he is, completed robot mode, weapons and everything. And then of course, we need to take a look at his mutant head, which is painted, so it ends up being closer in hue to the lower body bluish details than the upper body one, which is plastic. It didn't color match, very, very well. The painted details are more green than the plastic, but it's good enough for what it is, So yeah, regardless of what mode he's in, I think he just looks really, really good and is probably the best use of this mold as far as just, pure aesthetics. Here's our comparison shot with Cheetor's robot mode. And one thing that's interesting is that when the CGI designers, created their model for Tigatron, color-wise, they made his details like a one-for-one palette swap of Cheetor, whereas originally their toys weren't that way. And because this deco is based on the CGI version, he ends up being more or less a one-for-one palette swap of Cheetor. So where Cheetor is yellow, he's white. Where Cheetor is dark blue, he's green-blue. Where he's gold, he's silver. So that ends up being, just a pretty interesting little detail there. Now, I will say both of these guys look absolutely awesome. They're both just really, really cool-looking figures. I will say, though, I am a little biased toward Tigatron. I love his nice, clean colors. Like Cheetor, he's got good colors, but they are also a little... I don't know, they kind of remind me of a box of like Kraft mac and cheese. Like, even his gold is more of like a bronze color. It's not as nice as this like just really bright, shiny silver that Tigatron's got going on. So while they're both really stellar and Cheetor is easily the more popular of the two characters, I do actually find myself preferring the Tigatron version just a bit more. And while we still have both these guys out, let's go ahead and compare their mutant heads too. Just so you can, get like the full comparison here. The mutant heads don't flip down very well when their heads are turned. You have to have them facing pretty much forward. So yeah, that's what they look like. And again, just a one-for-one palette swap. Blue to bluish green, gold to silver. Then on the tusks, yellow to white. I guess the only thing that doesn't really follow that is the gut gun, because as we already pointed out, the Takara version just dropped the paint app for whatever reason. Might have been an oversight, I don't know. Okay, now for our robot comparison with the Kingdom Tigatron, you can see this is where things start to really differ here. The original Tigatron toy was just a straight recolor of Cheetor. Same size, same shape. However, when they did make the Beast Wars cartoon, and they decided to have both characters in it, they wanted them to be distinguished by more than just, their color palette and some minor details on like the face and the beast head. So they made Tigatron significantly bigger than Cheetor, which, follows the fact that his beast mode would be quite a bit bigger than Cheetor's. And those were two of the very few characters in the series whose beast modes were roughly, the size that they were supposed to be in real life. Most of them were either way too big or way too small. So, naturally, when they made modern updates to these figures in Kingdom, they decided to not just go ahead and recolor the Cheetor toy, but make an all-new Voyager class mold. That way it allows him to be bigger, and allows him to have a little bit more complex engineering, which really works in this guy's favor, because while I really do not like the Kingdom Cheetor figure, I do very much like the Kingdom Tigatron, because he, while committing, some of the mistakes that Cheetor has, like, I still don't really like the way his lower legs and stuff work, he ends up pulling it off a lot better. Like, the torso works a lot better, the head sculpt is just, perfect. Look at that. Right out of the cartoon. And even though I hate the way that it's stored in the beast mode, he at least actually comes with his gut gun. Now, he does still end up with, like, the tail whip thing, which isn't nearly as cool as the tail gun, but at least he has two weapons, unlike the Cheetor that only has the one. So I really do appreciate this Tigatron for being what he is, and I am glad that they didn't just take the old school route like they did here, and just recolor it and call it a day. Not that this toy isn't amazing, but, he's pretty out of scale with his teammate there. Of course, during the days of Beast Wars, the robot scale, really wasn't a concern. They didn't care. There's a reason that there's a basic class Optimus Primal and an ultra class Optimus Primal. He just drastically changes size depending on the toy. One thing that is kind of interesting, despite the added yellowing from paint, the actual plastic color of this Tigatron is much closer to how the original toy looked. It's a little bit dingier looking, not quite as, bleached white. So that actually puts him a bit more off model than this version. He also does sadly lose the silver accents, much like the Kingdom Cheetor loses the gold, and instead replaces a lot of them with just kind of like a pearly white instead. So he does come a lot closer than Cheetor to matching both like the CGI model and the classic toy, but he still doesn't get everything right. They still avoided certain details, or just maybe decided they felt he looked better without them. I don't know. And for a final group shot, we're going to bring out the new Mutant Tigatron again, just so we can compare the mutant head, or, battle mask, whatever you want to call it. Now, they did do a very good job of recreating the details of this for the new Tigatron. The biggest difference is that One of these looks like a completely different head that's very bestial and, as such has kind of an elongated skull like a snout. Whereas this one, it's more compact because it has to be to, fit in the same like cavity and everything inside the tiger neck. And it looks more like an actual battle mask just worn over Tigatron's face rather than a completely different like beast head. So yeah, it's not exactly the same. It's a little more squished, but all the major details are still there. So I think they did a really just stellar job of just recapturing the way this looks on a, new figure. And I think they did a better job, doing it on him than they did on, say, like Shadow Panther, who, like, it's okay, but just not nearly as good. And this completes our look at the vintage reissue of Beast Wars Tigatron. I gotta say, I really, really like this guy. I think he came out very well. The tolerances, despite all these years having gone by, are still just really sharp, really nice. In fact, I think they're even a little bit better than the Cheetors. Not that Cheetor, had bad tolerances, but these seem just a little tighter. It's true, he's not, the original Hasbro version, but he is essentially the original Takara version, which is arguably the more sought-after one anyway, because of how clean and nice it looks and how show accurate it is. So there is that little bit of silver lining there. You are getting at least some vintage reissue, even if it's not necessarily the North American one, which is more than I could say for the other ones. So yeah, he plays great, he looks great. I do find myself actually liking him a little bit more than Cheetor. Not that Cheetor has issues, but just personal preference. I like this guy. I've also never owned a version of the original Tigatron. Like, the Kingdom one is my first real, like, Beast Wars Tigatron. So getting to go back so quickly and get this guy, even after Kingdom pretty much just came out, it's pretty exciting. And I'm honestly kind of shocked that he did come out so soon after Cheetor. I mean, he's literally just the next wave as a recolor, which they tend to space those out more. So a little shocked there. Not disappointed. I mean, I'm happy to have him. But you'd think he'd, maybe like a third wave kind of release. So yeah, I think if you pick this guy up, you'll be pretty satisfied with him. He is still, in my opinion, kind of overpriced like all the other reissues are. You are going to pay modern deluxe prices for a rather simple deluxe from 1996 or 7. But at that deluxe price point, I feel like the price gouging is not as bad as others. Like Rat Trap's easily the worst because they just bump them up a size class just cause. And then like Scorponok's pretty bad, and then the Ultra classes are also pretty bad. They're like a 150% markup. So, you are going to pay more than you probably want to, but I think you can, stomach it for a pretty cool and relatively rare toy. Tigatron hasn't had a re-release unlike Cheetor since, the old 90s toy. So if you manage to track one down, they did finally actually pop up on Walmart's website, like as of tonight. So you can find it there, though I think it's sold out online, but he is starting to show pretty regularly at the actual Walmart stores. So if you want him, check your local store. You can pretty likely find him here in the next, I'd say week or so. All right, so that is how, I feel about this toy. I obviously like it a lot, but now I want to know what you all think of Tigatron. Do you plan on picking this up? Are you interested in getting, a Cheetor recolor? Or do you not want this for some reason? Just you think, the newer Tigatron is better, and why go back to, an undersized toy? You don't like Tigatron, you don't like Beast Wars, or, some other reason. Any and all feedback's always welcome in the comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this very exciting look at the new Walmart exclusive vintage reissue of Beast Wars Tigatron. And with all that said, I will see you next time.